Hey, Dee, do you know how sometimes you have a rhetorical question, but it turns out to be an actual question?
Yes, I do.
Well, here's my example. Who stole zinnias?
Uh, Nobody?
Well, somebody stole zinnias from the front entrance of my neighborhood where I planted them. So that rhetorical question is a real question.
I can't imagine anybody so cheap that they would steal zinnias, but yeah, whatever. Goodness.
I can only think it is a compliment to how well I'm growing. They just couldn't resist.
There you go. I like how you put a positive spin on that. Shall we get started?
We shall. Welcome to the Garden Angelus, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana, where I have a suburban garden measured in square feet. It's about a third of an acre.
And I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I garden on 7.5 acres out in the country. I garden about 1.5 acres.
We call ourselves Garden Angelists because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening and we want others to love it too.
Yes, we do. And we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all of our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and often the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, when, where. Let's move on to this week's episode.
Hey, Dee.
Hey, how's your garden grow?
Well, until yesterday, we still hadn't got rain. Woke up yesterday morning and it was raining a little bit, but not enough. Then the sun came out. Then about 3:00, whoosh, here comes this big old storm, dropped a 1/2 inch of rain here, dropped hail and tornadoes south of me and in other parts of Indiana. So it was a beast.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Well, it's still raining here. It stopped today. It's rained and rained and rained, but I'm glad you finally got some rain. So what were you going to say about Basil Becky?
So Basil Becky, one of our regular listeners, did check in with me on Instagram because she heard about the tornadoes and the big hail and all that. And it was about 10 miles south of here. But anyway, last week was more about watering, and I picked some peas. I fertilized stuff on Friday. Didn't get a lot more done until this morning. I had a big burst of, okay, I got to be done in time to record the podcast. So I watered containers that didn't get in the rain. Mm-hmm. I pulled out the pea vines, picked the straggler peas, pulled out those vines, pulled out some bolting lettuce and kale, tied up my tomatoes, suckered them, and also sowed a few more rows of beans. And now here I am. How was your week, Dee?
My week was great. I worked a lot in the garden for the whole week. I worked really hard. And then because I was having a garden tour, I opened my garden.
I saw.
And that was really, really fun. And it was really, really hot. And we even had a little tiny pop-up storm that day that lasted about 10 minutes. And everybody huddled into the garage while we waited. And let's see, what else did I do? I fixed the watering system, the drip irrigation on my pots on the deck, because I could tell some of it wasn't watering right. So I took 1.5 hours and sat down and figured out what was going on. What it was is that some of the tubes didn't get in the pots where they needed to. And so now the pots look a lot better. And then I deadheaded some of my zinnias in the cutting garden, which they're all doing better now.
Good.
And I propped up the tithonia that fell over in a rainstorm, and the zinnias and the hollyhocks, and oh my gosh, a lot of things blew over in that storm. And then I also went to visit Michael Kowalczyk's garden with his grandmother, Nancy, in Newcastle. They're going to be on the big daylily tour next year. So,
ooh.
Yes, and I took lots of pictures. So I'd had a very, very busy week, and I'm going to take it easy today and not do too much.
Well, good for you. Good for you. Now let's play favorites.
Let's do. You go first. Yours is exciting.
Well, Pan American Seed sent me a couple of annuals to try. One of them is called Sweet Talk Deep Pink Cuphea, or Cuphea, however you say it.
Mm-hmm. Cuphea. Mm-hmm.
And I kind of just stuck it in this pot with some other plants that they sent me and kind of forgot about it. And I looked at one day and thought, what's that? That's pretty. And it is pretty, and it's got deep pink flowers. I did do a blog post about it. We'll link to that, but it is so pretty. So I'm going to go down the greenhouse and say, could you put this on your list of things to grow next year?
They definitely do need to, because that is a pretty Cuphea. I've never seen that exact color combination, and you put it on your Instagram.
Yes, I did. Yes, it's on my blog and my Instagram. How about you? What's your favorite?
In my garden, my favorite this week is my phenomenal lavender. And this was so funny because that's the actual name of the lavender variety, right? And people would say, "What's this lavender?" on the tour. And I'd say, "It's phenomenal." And they'd say, "Yes, it is. But what's this lavender?" And I was like, no, you don't understand. It's named phenomenal. And then we'd all laugh. I mean, it happened over and over and over again. So that was pretty funny. I talk about that lavender on my Instagram. And also somebody else likes Sensational, which I haven't had as good a luck with. I've had really good luck with Phenomenal. So that's mine.
Very nice. So let me do a quote and send us into our flower topic. Be different. Be original. Nobody will remember a specific flower in a garden filled with thousands of the same yellow flower, but they will remember the one that managed to change its color to purple. And that is Susie Kassam, and she has a book called Rise Up and Salute the Sun, which is some of her writings. She's an American artist, writer, filmmaker, philosopher, cultural critic, essayist, and poet of Egyptian origin, born in Ohio in 1975.
What an interesting lady.
Yeah.
That's a great quote. I couldn't say more. So I thought this was great that you picked this quote for our topic this week, because we're discussing native coneflowers in the Echinacea genus. And so most of these are purple. Almost all of them are.
Yep.
Purple. But I mean, there's a couple that are yellow, or one that's yellow, but that's the only one, the Paradoxa. And you kind of listed ones that you found, because I started with that and then you finished it up. And but then you said we are only going to talk about 3 of them.
Yeah,
So
because I think the 3 we chose are ones that you would be able to go and buy them. The others, we don't want to send anybody off on a wild echinacea chase to get some coneflower that may or may not grow that we have no experience with, but we have 3 that we have experience with. So the first one is the pale purple coneflower, and you have this one, don't you?
I have all of these, and I also have Echinacea angustifolia, but yes, I have 4 of these. So yes, the first one's Polita, which is my favorite.
And I only have the second one we're going to talk about. So tell us why Polita is your favorite.
So Polita grows wild in southern Missouri. I see it everywhere. It also grows wild in northeast Oklahoma. It may grow wild in other places of Oklahoma, but I know it grows wild in these places because I see it when we go to Big Cedar every year. And we drive that drive every year. And I've been driving that drive since I was a kid, or riding in the car, because my grandparents lived up there. And there's nothing like a field or a rocky bluff with these coneflowers on it. And I think it's kind of unfair because they call this one pale purple coneflower. It's much more than that. It has reflexed petals.
I know, it's pretty.
Very long reflexed petals. It has taken me forever to get it established in my garden. And I actually went down before the podcast because I was going to take a picture of it, because I might, I was going to take a picture of it, but mine don't look that good. So I think I need to move it to a much more sunny location. But you see it in both sun and dappled shade in throughout these 2 areas. And it's just a beautiful plant if you can get it going. It took me years, and I keep replanting it because I think it's worthy. It loves alkaline soil, obviously, because the limestone cliffs of southern Missouri. It likes its soil pretty dry with, moments of wetness, but then pretty dry during the summer. When it's happy, it just colonizes and looks beautiful with grasses. Mine's planted with Mexican feathergrass, by the way.
Oh, I can't grow Mexican feathergrass. It's not hardy here.
Well, I'm sorry. It's really pretty. And I'll be honest, it's only marginally hardy in my garden. I know further south, it's very hardy. And it reseeds here a little bit, but not a lot. I have a friend in Oklahoma City. It drives her nuts. So it can be quite the reseeder. And it's a real problem in California, for example. But anyway, let's talk. That's all I have to say about that coneflower.
Well, so Echinacea purpurea, this is the one that I have, and I have it quite a bit in my ploppers field with all my perennials because it
Mhm.
also reseeds.
Yeah, I love it. I have it everywhere. It's a good one.
I don't know if I have it everywhere, but I have quite a bit of it. Now, it hasn't started to bloom yet.
Oh, it's blooming. All of my echinaceas are blooming right now. In fact, people kept stopping me and asking about powwow wildberry because it does show up a lot.
Oh, I, I
Um,
I will say that the hybrids that we talked about last week, all those are
mhm.
blooming, but the regular straight purpurea has not started blooming yet.
See, you call it purpurea and I call it purpurea. I don't know which one's,
I
I
don't,
mean, it's Latin, so who knows, right?
yeah.
Actually, I can see purpurea or whatever, regular old good old coneflower blooming right outside my window or outside the kitchen door right now. And in fact, after we're done, I'll take a picture of it with one of my daylilies that echoes the color. It has an eye
Nice.
zone that's that purple. We can put it in our newsletter this week.
That would be awesome. So it's an easy plant to grow. Obviously, we both have it everywhere. It likes full sun, although a lot of mine is now in partial shade because my trees keep growing. And so I was thinking the other day that some of these beds are getting to be a little more shady than sunny. And so as stuff starts to wane in the shade, I'm going to have to start thinking about shade plants. But that's not our topic today. But anyway, the echinacea just keeps on powering through.
So people in Oklahoma would tell you it's not that easy to grow, and it's not. It's
Oh,
kind of hard.
in Indiana, it's not that
Um,
hard.
and I think it's because of our soil. I think, it really wants unamended soil that drains well. And unfortunately, in much of Oklahoma, we have red clay and it's hard to grow it there. So they would tell you it's not easy to grow. I can grow it pretty easy, but I work really hard on my soil to get it to drain well. And I don't
Uh-huh.
amend around it because it doesn't want a lot of manure or, other stuff. I got asked a lot. In fact, I'm getting ready to do a blog post on all the questions that were asked of me on Saturday.
Good
And I get
idea.
asked a lot about amending soil. And I'm like, this is what I use, you know. So
Very
anyway,
good.
don't use much around any of the echinaceas. They really don't want it, and they don't want a lot of mulch, just a little.
They actually want a little bit of neglect.
Yeah, they're a prairie flower.
And I leave the cone flower, I leave the cone through the winter and fall or fall and winter so birds can feed off of it. And that's probably why I get seedlings coming up.
It probably is. Do you ever deadhead like when it's in the middle of bloom? Do you ever deadhead it to make more flowers?
I'd like to say that I'm the kind of gardener that very, fastidiously deadheads every single day to make sure that everybody has a chance to rebloom. But
Mhm.
obviously, that is not me. So, no. If I see it and I think, it looks a little punk, I think I'm going to deadhead it, give it a little oomph. But no, no.
Gotcha. I deadhead some, especially if I can see other flowers trying to come up, but not all the time. I don't, I'm in the middle of deadheading daylilies, so I don't always have time to mess with all of my coneflowers too. So the next one we're going to talk about is Echinacea tenensiensis. And the reason I know about this coneflower is because of our friend Gail Eichelberger, who has a wonderful blog called Clay and Limestone. And tenensiensis, I love that word, tenensiensis. It grows wild in Tennessee, hence the name. And she has been on a mission to make people more aware of this flower and also to try to save it because it's getting quite rare.
Yeah. I mean, as more areas become developed, a lot of the native habitats of these wildflowers that you think, oh, that's going to be around forever, slowly they start to fade out. I was looking to see, and I didn't, I'll have to go find another link to see
Okay.
what the hardiness zone is for this echinacea.
Yeah, I don't know either. I can grow it here. Do you grow it?
I do not. And so I'm thinking, no, I wonder why I don't grow it.
Well, it might not be hardy where you live. I don't know.
Well, the Missouri Botanical Garden, which is a very reliable source, says zone 5 to 6, and the native range is Tennessee.
Right. So this flower only grows native in Tennessee. I mean, naturally in Tennessee. It has been introduced in a few places And but it's definitely its own thing. So it has upturned rose purple petals. So the flowers, the petals turn upward instead of going backwards. And it has a very, very bright coppery center disc. And so it blooms a long time and it's really, really pretty. It just is a little less vigorous and smaller than purpurea. And it has more narrow leaves.
Here's something interesting that the Missouri Botanical Garden wrote about it. It said, easily grown in average, medium, well-drained soil in full sun to part shade. Must be grown in isolation from other species of echinacea several miles in order to harvest seed that retains the genetic integrity of the endangered species.
Yeah, I don't do that. I have it in one place, and you know what? It may even have switched around by now.
Yeah, it says if planted with other species or cultivars of echinacea, it may be crowded out due to its less vigorous growth habit.
Which is why it's on the federal endangered species list.
I guess.
I wanted to bring up one other one that I grow over by that one. And it's Echinacea atrorubens, which is the Topeka purple coneflower, which is native to Kansas. And I suspect mine have, blended. I do love that plant. It is very tall. The Topeka purple coneflower in my garden is unbelievably tall, which is really cool. So right now it's kind of finished blooming. I need to trim off the blooms to see if I can get it to bloom a little longer. I finally got it to take off. It has been, I kept it alive by that. That's what I mean by that. So another great flower, and it probably has mixed with my tendensiensis. But people should, if they ever get to go in the area where Gail lives, around her area, they have tendensiensis there. And I'll try to find one of her blog posts where she talks about it, because it's a cool plant.
We will link to it then. So that's our little dive into the native coneflowers. You got anything else to say?
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
I do want to say one that
I have nothing else.
I have one other thing to say.
What's that?
Well, I was looking at the Missouri Botanic site and said not really any serious diseases or pests, except sometimes Japanese beetles.
Oh, well, see, Japanese beetles don't get them here. You know what eats them here?
Grasshoppers?
Silvery checker spots. No, silvery checker spot. Butterfly caterpillars. And so what I do is I just take the leaf off and then I go and put them in gold sturm. And I actually posted about that on my stories. Whatever those little darlings get on, I just pinch it off and then I go put it in gold sturm, because they like gold sturm just as much. And they can't hurt gold sturm.
So are you seeing any Japanese beetles yet?
I have not seen a single Japanese beetle this year.
You better knock on wood and throw salt behind your shoulder.
Already knocked on wood right now. You know what? One person theorized, I can't think of her name right now on Instagram, but she and I talk all the time. She theorized it was the fire. And I said, well, the part of the garden where I get Japanese beetles really bad didn't get touched by the fire, but maybe they just didn't like the smoke. I don't know.
Well, and that it would be the grubs down in the ground at that point. So I don't know. Now,
there was a lot of ash that fell on that part of the garden, and we mulched it really heavy. So I don't know.
Now here,
honestly,
this is the week that I would see them. If I'm going to see a bunch, they'll start coming out this week.
I've seen zero.
I probably jinxed myself.
I am seeing a lot of, I hope you haven't. Maybe they're just not having a good year.
I hope not.
She was watching for them too. I had another thought about that, but I don't know what it was. Keep going.
Well, we're ready for a quote and head into the vegetable garden now.
We eat so good when we eat out of the garden. That's Carol's Aunt Lula, who I wish I knew.
Well, she said that one year at the family reunion. She said she made that comment. But anyway, I swear that my relatives in southern Indiana, they grow squash, okra, green beans, and tomatoes.
They don't grow corn or melons or?
Not generally. I mean, obviously they grew up on a farm and they grew all that stuff on the farm, but most of them, I think my one aunt, not Lula, but another aunt, I think she grows tomatoes. 6 tomato plants is her garden.
That's what my dad grew. He just grew tomatoes. That was it. And he was really good at it. and he knew exactly which ones he liked to buy. And those are the 5 that he bought. And that was that.
So before we dive into our topic, I did want to say I was riding with my sister and she listens to our podcast and she says, "What's a potager?" She said, "Is that a building?" And I said, "No, that's just a French word for kitchen garden that Dee uses to describe her garden."
It comes from the word potage or pottage, which means soup. It's a soup garden. And in England, they call it a potager. And in France, they call it a potager. And I say potager because I took French. But both work, and it's usually formal.
Yes.
It's a very formal garden. Although mine has a big giant sunflower growing out of it, which I haven't shown you yet. And that is not very kitchen garden like.
That is not kitchen garden like.
Cool giant sunflower that I left it because the stalk is, 2.5 inches around. This is going to be a doozy to dig out when it's done, but I don't care. It looks really cool.
That's good. So we were going to talk about what to plant when you pull out the spring crops. And I just pulled out some more lettuce and kale today. I probably could have kept the kale going, but after a while, you're like, that's enough. And now is the time of the warm season crops. So the one thing that I just keep planting every time like rows open up is green beans, because you can get a harvest in about 60 days, 55 to 60 days.
Okay.
And I like it. We had listed okra, corn, and melons, but those probably should have been seed sown for those already. It's getting late for those to be able to expect a harvest in my garden.
In my garden, you still got time, but do it now.
So my okra is about 8 inches tall. I didn't plant corn this year. I don't have melons, but I have that one pumpkin. And I looked at it the other day and I thought, you silly pumpkin, you got the biggest yellow flower on you. It's really going to produce something. So fun.
I'm excited for you. You're going to enjoy that. So did we mention cucumbers yet?
Cucumbers are kind of in the melon group. It's kind of late would you sow seeds for cucumbers now?
I might do it right after this podcast. Because here's the thing. I was going to sow them in the same spot where I have sweet peas, and the stupid sweet peas won't give up.
Darn those sweet peas.
And I don't want to pull them up because I don't ever get sweet peas and they smell so good.
Mine look really good too.
And I can't believe how good they look. They shouldn't look this good this late. But you know what? I may put the cucumbers on. So the one set of sweet peas that are light pink that came from Baker's Creek that are an heirloom, they're starting to make pods. So what I might do is just plant those cucumber seeds right in next to them and then just let the cucumbers grow on top of those. And then when the pods come up, I might save that seed because that's an heirloom. So I might be able to save it.
Possibly.
I'm trying to maximize my space. I don't know. Or I could just pull them up. What do you think, Carol?
I think you should try to save some seeds from them.
Just for fun?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you could also grow summer squash. But as people know, in Oklahoma, squash bugs are our nemesis. And there's a lot of theories about squash bugs. And there's some theories that if you start the squash now and plant it late, you get fewer squash bugs. I don't know if that's true. I've tried it. I still get squash bugs. I've kind of given up on squash, but I love squash. And I actually was watching Gardenary Co. She's the lady on Instagram who has a beautiful potager, a beautiful kitchen garden. And she was talking about she has squash vine borers. Sorry.
Yes.
I was thinking about Japanese beetles again. See, I don't get squash vine borers, but I get squash bugs in abundance. So she was saying that she never plants all of her squash together. She puts one plant and then she surrounds it with a bunch of other stuff. I thought that was brilliant. She says that if she does get a squash vine borer, she immediately just cuts off that leaf. She said she doesn't try to split it open and do all that stuff.
Right.
And I thought that's really smart because I do that sometimes with squash bugs. If I see the eggs on the leaf, I don't squish them anymore. I just take the leaf off. And she also takes off all of her leaves around the ground. And then she doesn't mulch around them. I thought this was all really good advice because I don't mulch around mine. She had some good advice.
I have heard like if you have flea beetles get all over your eggplant, the one year that I ended up planting them like way late, like it was into June, no flea beetles.
Right, because they come through and go away.
Yes. So,
and squash bugs make several generations a season, but I think that planting, I actually have thought about putting in a squash. I thought about planting some seeds right now because I could plant some seeds for like one squash plant in one area and another one in another area. And they already are surrounded by flowers, including the giant sunflower. Let's see what happens. What do you say?
I say go for it if you've got the seed.
Oh, I've got the seed. You know that.
I planted nasturtiums around my squash because Jessica Walliser in her book, it's called Plant Partners, isn't it?
Yep. Plant Partners, one of the best books out there.
She said that there, because she went and found actual scientific studies, not like old wives' tales, that nasturtium helps to keep them away. They don't like the scent or whatever. So the squash is kind of down the middle of the bed. And I only did three different squashes this year. It's only so much a person can eat. And then I lined that with the nasturtiums that I just got seeds at the store, and they've come up and they look really good because the weather, even though we haven't gotten rain, it's been mild. So we haven't had those, above 88 degrees, 90-degree days.
Right. So you're not having too much expiration. Is that right?
Yes.
Expiring.
In fact,
yeah.
I shouldn't say this. I'll probably write a blog post this week. So, we're a little off topic, but you know how you grow lettuce and you just kind of pick it in the spring until it bolts?
Sure.
So I have this Great Lakes lettuce, and then I also have a red romaine. They're forming heads. So I have a head of lettuce to pick.
Wow.
I know.
Well, and you might be able to eat it because the temperatures haven't gotten too bad.
Exactly. I don't think it'll be too bitter.
I don't think so either. So I think we've kind of exhausted it, but let's run back through that deal again. If you're in Oklahoma or Texas, you could still plant okra, corn, melons, bush green beans, cucumbers, and summer squash. You are really getting late for melons and corn because they take 90 days and longer. Okra, I think it depends on which variety you grow. If you grow one of the dwarf ones, they produce faster. So you might get away with that. You can plant bush green beans every 2 weeks, and Carol can too, because then you get kind of a continuous harvest. I need to go out and plant some more because my second set I planted, something ate it all. That's just the way it goes. And we've discussed what to do about squash bugs there and also squash vine borers. And then there are the seeds that and then there are other things. So I don't know what this list is that we put in here.
Well, that list was, if you are going to, it's too soon to plant the fall vegetables. We're still talking about, but order Malabar spinach, Swiss chard, radishes. I added radishes to the list because honestly, the best radishes I grew were the ones I planted last August. They were the best.
Yeah. If you're going to have a fall vegetable garden, you could do that. You could also start some tomatoes now, maybe, and get them to bear. No, I think you're too late. Some people, in Texas and Oklahoma, especially Southern Oklahoma, they do 2 sets of tomatoes. They start seeds for a second set.
Here's a secret for you. Not a secret, but some garden centers, if you go now, they'll have cucumbers, squash, bigger tomatoes. They'll have them started. And so if you're like, I'm too late to grow seeds, you can go and get the bigger plants and put those in.
You could. I think the only place that would have them here, because it's getting to be too hot, might be TLC. TLC Nursery locally might have them. But all of the normal places we buy, like Bonnie plants, those are all looking really rough. So anyway, it's time to order your seeds for fall. It seems really early, but it's not. So if you want to grow turnips, radishes, beets, lettuce, spinach, all the cold crops. Yep. It's time.
It's time.
And then we'll talk about, when we get closer, we'll talk about trying to start them, even though it's still too warm, because that's what happens here.
Yeah, it's kind of a conundrum.
It is kind of a conundrum. There's a lot of things that are conundrums about gardening. I had somebody contact me. This is off topic slightly, but we're having one of those days. I had somebody text me on Saturday morning, and she was like, Dee, my zinnias have mildew, and they're the Oklahoma zinnias. And I said, well, it's been really, really humid. So
Yeah, you've had a lot of rain.
embrace imperfection and thin those zinnias out. That was my advice. So, and people are going to ask, and is there anything you can spray on them? Well, you can spray it, but the stuff that already has mildew, it isn't going to stop that. That's already started. And honestly, just then pray that we start to get a little breeze, things like that. And embrace imperfection, because that in gardening, that's one of the best things you can do.
Yes, absolutely, Dee. There's if you strive for perfect, your gardening is not your activity.
No, it's definitely not. All right. So you want to do the next quote?
I do. To make a prairie, it takes a clover and one bee, one clover and a bee, and reverie. The reverie alone will do if bees are few. Emily Dickinson.
Oh, that's such cute. I love that poem.
That is funny. You should cross stitch that or put it on a sign out in your prairie.
Yeah, I'll just do that in my spare time.
Well, up at the meadow, you can write a little sign.
I know. That would be okay. That would be adorable. Yes. All right. The bookshelf is this week Grasses for Gardens and Landscapes, Design, Selection, Cultivation by Neil Lucas. And we have 2 affiliate links. And I read through the whole book.
Good for you, Dee.
Believe it or not. So Neil Lucas is an ornamental grass specialist, whatever that is, and he is director of Knoll Gardens in Dorset, England. And I meant to look up where Dorset is, but then I got distracted trying to find the Echinacea pallida. So they're considered one of the best, and Carol's looking up right now, I see her typing. They're considered one of the best naturalistic gardens in England and elsewhere. He is a big fan of Pete Udolph, and who isn't? And he finds grasses to be more adaptable and easier to maintain than trees and especially shrubs. I would agree. And one of the nicest compliments somebody paid me on my garden on Saturday is they were actually looking at a shrub. They were looking at Ogon spirea, and they said, your garden is so soft. It is so touchable.
Oh, that's nice.
That was a really nice thing to say. And I laughed and I said, I don't like spiky things, but I tolerate the roses. So there you go. I don't like being stuck when I'm out there working. So I really liked the section on designing with grasses. The first section was about designing a prairie, basically. And he pointed out, which people don't understand a lot of the times, that if you're creating a prairie meadow, you're going to have a lot of grass in it because primarily it's grass. Or as I always think of when we talk about these grasses and meadows, is forbs within a matrix, which is what your person told you when you were designing a garden. There are a lot more grasses than there are the other plants. So that section was pretty good, but my favorite section was designing with grasses, which is what I try to do. I grow a lot of panicums, which are our native switch grasses. And it was funny to listen to I felt like he was talking, but to read an Englishman talking about our native grasses.
That was the surprising thing is this is a British author. And because when you think about grasses, I mean, you immediately go to the American prairies. And so that was kind of interesting. I do know where Dorset is now, by the way. Dorset is in southwest England on the English Channel coast. Dorset borders Devon to the west, Somerset to the northwest, Wiltshire to the northeast, and Hampshire to the east. The county town is Dorchester. I guess that's how you say it. But anyway, it's in southwest England.
Dorchester. So I haven't been that far south, and but there's a garden. Let me find my book. Oh, what did I do with my book? Oh, I moved it for some reason, probably because the cat was attacking it. I have been to one of the gardens. It was Scrampston, I think, And that was the one that was designed by Pete Udolph. And he used a particular grass down the middle of these very formal beds, and he made a river of the grass through them. I saw that he shows it in the book in the fall when that grass has turned yellow. But I saw it when it was in the spring and it was just starting to grow. And I thought it was a really interesting design element. It's really cool to see it in the book when it was the fall. And that was a year when it was really, really dry in England. And I want to say that was 2017. It was dry in 2018 too. But in 2017, they had little sprinklers out there watering that garden. And I thought, wow, you guys aren't used to watering, because it was not efficient at all. So it was really interesting to read. He also talks about other grassy parts of the world, like this African savanna, just different sections. And about how, I didn't think about this, but in the Mediterranean, grasses in the middle of summer hunker down and don't do anything. And they do all of their stuff in the winter, which makes sense. So in my own garden, I grow panicums. I grow the fountain grasses, pennisedums. My favorite is pennisedums fireworks because of the pink stripe down the middle, which goes away in the middle of the summer and comes back when it cools off. And I have grama grass. I have blonde ambition in the rock paths, and I have pink muley grass, and I have Mexican feather grass. And there may be some other grasses I have also in the pennisedum class. For the ones that are perennial, I really like adagio. It has a white stripe down the center, so it looks silvery all summer. So I grow a lot of grasses in this garden. Oh, and I also have, I forgot one. I have black hawks, which he mentions in the book, and that is tall bluegrass. Blue. Oh my goodness! Now I'm not going to be able to think of it. Black hawks is a tall native. It's a selection of a tall native grass that we grow in Oklahoma. And it's the one that has the turkey's foot. And I'll probably think of it, when we're in a different section, but it's blue stem, big blue stem. I kept thinking blue. And this one's called Black Hawks. It has dark purple stems, for lack of a better word. And then it blooms this real pretty darker version of what it would normally bloom if it were a big blue stem or a regular blue stem. It looks really good. It's in my kitchen border right outside my door. And the thing about grasses is you don't even notice them until they start to do their thing.
That is true.
They're either green or dark purple. This one's dark purple, but it's short and it stays really short until the end of the season. And then it just goes up. And I think it's really dramatic and beautiful. And I actually added perennial hibiscus, dark leafed ones, to that same border to have a real, depth within that border. Enough about me. I like the book.
Well, the nice thing about this book is if you want to know about grasses, it's nice to be able to just pull a book off the shelf and go through it. And it's so much better than searching online and hoping that, because when you search online, you're kind of finding what somebody wants to sell you.
He divides up the grasses by, the area and what time they bloom and what type of conditions. I thought that was really good.
Yes. So, and I'm going to admit that I don't have a lot of grasses in my garden. I've got some sea oats that I religiously deadhead in the fall because I don't want those they'll be everywhere.
They're very aggressive. Yeah.
And I've got some, I think it's the panicum switchgrass or whatever it is.
Switchgrasses. Yeah. Panicum, forgot them.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I just don't have very many. And even where I have the forbs in the matrix, the grasses have kind of petered out, believe it or not. Huh. It was little blue stem, I think.
Need some more grass.
I think I do too.
Oh, well, little blue stem, I cannot grow to save my life. It's in the upper pasture because it came there by itself. But every time I've tried to grow it in my garden, I just can't get it to do anything. So I tend to stick with I love pink muley grass. It looks great in my border, but it won't work for you because it's not hardy. So
no. And I had a friend who was just desperate to get that blonde ambition, that grama grass.
Blue grama. Mm-hmm.
He was just, and I managed to source it for him from the greenhouse. And so he was very happy to get several containers of it. It does have the prettiest seed heads, the way they kind of.
It does. It doesn't look like much until it does its thing. I have 2 clumps of it and I got it in Texas. I think you need some more pennisedums. because they're the easiest ones to
I
grow.
do.
They're rock hardy. Yeah. And look at adagio, because adagio is really pretty and it has great big pretty plumes. I grow it along that bed that is up against the retaining wall on the other side of the deck. And it's a really solid grass. You can't screw it up. Even I can't screw it up.
One of the grasses I do have, and I got it as a sample plant from somebody, and I just turned to a page in here, is the blue fescue. That's just a big clump of blue grass. And it kind of sat there for a couple of years, but it's grown to be, 18 inches across. And it's just really striking when you see it in the garden.
I really don't. I can't grow blue fescue very well either. So there you go. We have very different climates sometimes.
We do. But this is a good book. It's Grasses for Gardens and Landscapes, Design, Selection, Cultivation by Neil Lucas. And I'm just glad that there's a good book on. I don't know that I have any other book on grasses like this. Do you?
Yeah, I do. I have Greenlee's book, and I can't remember. I think it's John Greenlee. He wrote it, and we'll put that in our link. He wrote I think it's called American Meadow or something. I don't know. I'll look it up. I've kept that book for years, and we actually met him once at a garden symposium, and he was a speaker. Yeah, he was a speaker there. You might not have gone to that one because it was about grasses.
I might not have gone to that one because it was about grasses. Yeah, that'd be Carol. I know that.
And I also have another one that's about starting meadows from seed that really delves into grasses. And that would be it. But I'll keep all those because, for one thing, I have a meadow, and also my own garden is much more prairie-like than it ever was before.
Yeah, I'm just doing a search in my database of the books that I own, and
nothing on grasses.
There's Native Ferns, Moss, and Grasses by William Kalina, 2008.
Yeah,
I have that book. But anyway, and then Adrian Bloom wrote Bloom's Best Perennials and Grasses, but not one that's just grasses.
Right.
So, all right.
I'd say the two that are just grasses are the Greenlee book and this book.
Anyway, that's it. That's our book this week. I'm gonna put this one's staying.
Cool. It's a good book. It really is. On Earth, there is no heaven, but there are pieces of it. This is by Jules Renard, and he was a French author, and that's all we know about him.
Well,
but I agree.
Yeah, they had lists of his books and stuff, but they were in French.
Right.
And so we have 2 pieces of dirt today.
You do the first one.
So the first one was Dr. Linda Chalker Scott, PhD from the Washington State University. She has done more research on mulch and mulching and using cardboard in the garden, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And hands down, she says the best mulch to use for suppressing weeds is arborist chips. Well, when the arborist comes in and takes down a tree or whatever, and they chip everything up, all that stuff, that's what's good. It has every bit of the tree in it.
So last year we thinned out all of our trees, and when Luce came with his guys to do that, they chipped up a bunch of it, and I had a huge pile of arborist chips, and I used them in the garden. And I can attest to the fact that Linda's absolutely right. I mean, of course she is. It is a big difference. And one of the points she makes is that when we use bark, the packaged bark, which I use too some, bark has a rain resistant, it's water resistant. So water is repelled by it. And sometimes not only does it float, but it also washes over it and doesn't soak into the ground. Whereas arborist chips are the whole tree, including the leaves. And so rain does soak into the ground. And that was one of the big issues. And also because they're arborist chips and they have both leaves and all the parts of the tree, they decay differently. That was another point she made. And she's absolutely right. My garden is better now that I use arborist chips in it. The sad part is when the fire happened, when we got back that night and there were still hot spots around, all of a sudden there was this horrible whoosh on the other, because I have my mulch pile way, way down by the lake, away from my house, thank God. And all of a sudden there was this horrible whoosh and I saw huge flames, and that was my arborist chip pile. And it had just started to really decay, and it was great. But the good news is I Luz brings me some arborist chips now if I ask for them because he has to get rid of them.
Yeah.
If people only knew what they were worth.
Right. So there's three things to say here. One is I do get the wood chippings from my brother-in-law turning bowls. And I feel like it's not exactly arborist chips. There's no leaves in there, but it's the whole pieces of trees and things like that. It's the pith and everything. So I use that, and that it is suppressing weeds. I would like it to suppress more, especially these dandelions, but they are, if you are having trees taken out or trimmed, you can ask for them to leave your chips. If you know a tree trimmer person and they know you're going to use those in your garden and they do everything possible to keep foreign matter out, because a lot of time these guys, they're throwing junk in there too, like a whole log or something like that.
Right.
But if they know somebody's going to use it like that, they'll be more careful with it. And I think
they're called clean arborist chips.
Yeah, I think there are websites where you can go and say, "Hey, I'd like to get clean arborist chips," and then the arborists try to figure out where you are and give you a load because they have to pay to dump it.
And a lot of cities have arborist chips when they do some tree trimming, or like I know that Edmond, Oklahoma does that for sure. And then people come and get the mulch. They just call it mulch, but that's what it is. It's arborist
South
chips.
of here, my hometown, Greenwood, you can leave your limbs down at the curb and they'll pick them up and they grind them up. And then there's a place you can go and get them. But I don't live in that city, so I can't do that.
So there you go. That's if you guys want to go and look, we will link to it in our podcast newsletter. Now for the next one, Jalapeno-gate.
Whoa, D.
Jalapeno-gate. So some people were in my garden. It was the Oklahoma County Master Gardeners on Saturday, that group. And one of them said, "Oh my gosh, you've been hit by Jalapeno-gate too." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" They always know everything. They know it first. And apparently there's been this huge problem with jalapeno peppers this year. And I knew that my jalapeno peppers, which I actually picked a variety called Tam, which is out of the University of New Mexico. And it doesn't have all the heat of regular jalapenos. And I didn't get Tam. I got banana peppers, which is what everybody is getting this year.
Well,
banana peppers.
Mine haven't grown big enough for me to know what I'm going to get. Let's just say that.
It's a problem from Texas to Michigan. So I don't know if it'll be you or not. And it's just fascinating because you would think it's just a problem with the plants, but no, it's also a huge problem with some of the seeds. So depending on where people source their seeds from, and it's such a big issue right now. It's been in a bunch of newspapers and I missed it all. And mostly gardeners are just amused like I am. It's like, well, okay, as long as we have jalapeno seeds next year. But one of the ladies said that some places are saying it might be espionage. And I was like, oh my God.
Espionage.
It's like those zinnia people that stole your zinnias.
Well,
if it is espionage, which I highly doubt, it's a really dumb thing to be espionage for.
So if you have jalapeno seeds from a few years ago, you might want to save it and try to grow those. I'm trying to think if I grew old seeds from 2 years ago, if I bought new seed, probably bought new seed. I'm going to go check because it sounds like it's at the seed source level, which all like the places would get the seed from the same place. And if they had a mix up, then you wonder if people that got banana peppers have jalapenos. Banana-gate.
That's a good question. I don't know if there's any banana pepper gate or not, but there's definitely jalapeno-gate. So we thought our listeners would find that funny.
Well, I'm definitely going to watch. I will report in when mine start producing. All right, here's a quote to take us to rabbit holes. Every day, a million miracles begin at sunrise. Eric Jerome Dickey. And I did not have a chance to look him up. I don't know who he is, but that is the truth.
But he's right.
Yes.
I watched the sunrise this morning while I was deadheading daylilies. So I'll do my rabbit hole first because it's fast. It was my garden visit. I opened the garden. That's all I got. And I looked up Jalapeno-gate. And yeah, I've been affected too. So that's all I got.
So
your turn.
Dee, you told me to watch Father Brown season 10, episode 3, because it was all about a florist And there were so many horticultural puns, and there were so many.
It was hilarious.
That was hilarious. And of course, I won't want to, no spoilers here. So I watched that. And then Amazon Prime said, hey, Carol, here's a documentary about people who show chickens. You think you ought to watch that now too? And I'm thinking, Amazon Prime, I think I should. And so those people, I'm telling you, you think we're obsessed with gardening. You've not seen anything, but to their credit, I mean, so anyway, they followed.
Well, chickens are really fun. I had chickens for a long time.
I think there were three main chicken show people. An older guy who said, basically he couldn't work that out with his girlfriend, even though she was into chickens too. She says, it's just, you couldn't maintain your chickens and your relationship. And then,
so he went with the chickens?
Yes.
Okay.
And then the other woman was a recovering alcoholic, and the chickens were, that was all good. And then the other one was a young man trying to make it as a singer in Branson, Missouri, and his chickens were at his parents' farm. And so, it's the whole, I got to get my own place so I can take care of my show chickens. And then I remembered that I wanted to watch a documentary about Kurt Vonnegut Jr., so I paid for that and watched it. Because he's from Indianapolis. I don't know that I've ever read any of his books all the way through, which is probably sacrilege to some people. But if you don't know who he is, he had a great sense of humor. He wrote science fiction. He wrote
he wrote a lot of science fiction and futuristic stuff.
Yeah. He was a POW in World War II in Dresden, Germany.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was captured and marched to Dresden, and that's where Slaughterhouse 5, the name of the book, comes from. Mm-hmm. They were kept in a slaughterhouse, and it was number 5 that they were in. But anyway, they were down in a bunker when Dresden was bombed by the Allies. And he said, came back up, and there was no city.
Wow.
But his mother did commit suicide, so he had kind of a tragic life. But his family owned hardware stores in Indianapolis called Vonnegut's Hardware. And I'm old enough to remember when there was a Vonnegut's Hardware briefly at the mall, and I was thinking that was like 50 years ago. But anyway, so yeah. That was my, and now if you're a Kurt Vonnegut friend, and I'll say, and so it goes. That's how my afternoon went, because you made me watch a Father Brown's mystery.
Well, yes. And then I told you about how I called you and told you about Jalapeno-gate too. And I bugged you all afternoon because I bought more zinnia seeds, but we aren't going to talk about that.
Yeah,
right
we're not talking about somebody who's obsessed with zinnias. We don't know anything, but, wait a minute. Where were you on Wednesday? Never mind.
All right. So what are you going to do in the garden this week?
Okay. So we did get some rain yesterday afternoon, and I kind of held off trimming some shrubs and stuff because everything just felt so dry. And I thought, this is added stress. So I'm going to kick it into high gear. I got a bunch of pruning I'm going to do. And now, it rained. Now I got a bunch of weeding to do in the vegetable garden. So I'm in between kind of picking things. I'm going to pick my head lettuce, I think, and give that a whirl and see how that is.
I would so eat that if I could.
Of course, there'll be a blog post about it and all kinds of pictures. It'll be on the Instagram. I'll be bragging up a storm. Look at me growing head lettuce.
Look at you.
What about you?
Okay, so in my garden, I'm going to plant a few things I bought at the greenhouse in Norman, and that's the name of the greenhouse, And they're native perennials for the upper pasture, and I'm going to set up the hoses up there so that I can water it because it's getting ready to be time. I'm going to have to water it a little bit. And then I'm going to do a little weeding and a little deadheading. And I actually did a little weeding today around the Echinacea pallida. And I'm going to just keep things tidy, and I'm going to work in the mornings before it gets too hot.
That sounds like a delicious summer week.
Doesn't it, though?
All right. Well, let's wrap this thing up. We want to thank you for listening to The Garden Angelist. I hope you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. We publish every week on Wednesdays at 12 a.m. Eastern Time.
And if you listen to Apple Podcasts, we'd love a 5-star review. That helps us get noticed by others. Could you also share our podcast with your friends? Word of mouth is still the best way to get that word out there.
And be sure and check out our show notes for links for more information about today's topics, plus links to our own websites.
And subscribe to our Substack newsletter, The Garden Angelist at Substack.com, also listed in our show notes. If you do, you get a link to listen to the show a day early.
And if you want to help support us, use those affiliate links. If you buy something after clicking through on them, we earn a small commission and it costs you nothing. Or you can set up a monthly subscription through Buzzsprout or make a one-time donation through PayPal.
Thank you to everyone who has done so. It was lovely to chat with all of you over the Garden Gate. Bye until next week.
Bye, everybody.